welcome to another YouTube clip. I'm Brendan from Ocean Grove Camera and Photo, and today we're going to be talking about aperture. I'm going to keep this nice and short and as sweet as possible because aperture can be quite a confusing topic, but I just really want to give you the basics. This is basically Aperture 101. Aperture is basically your lens's ability to open and close an internal iris inside the lens that lets in more light and can also cut down more light. So if the aperture's open, the iris is open, it's obviously letting in more light, and if the aperture or the iris is closed down, it's actually letting in less light. What this has a massive impact on is what is in focus in your photo, also known as depth of field. Depth of field is literally the part of the photo that is in focus, but not as you look at it front on. It's sort of like if you could take the image off the wall or off the computer screen and turn it side on and have a look at how much is in focus. For example, from the front of this lens to the back part of the camera, whether it's from here to here that's in focus, or from here to my face that's in focus, or from here to infinity, in other words, way off in the distance what's in focus, the aperture controls that. So lenses that have a nice low aperture number can actually open up a lot wider. And in some ways that can be quite confusing, particularly for the beginner. However, all you really need to remember is the lower the number, the less is in focus. So in other words, low number, less in focus. But a lower number literally actually means that the lens is opening up more. So not all lenses can open wider. The lens I happen to have on this camera right here is an f1.8 lens, which is a very low aperture lens. You can get lower, of course, but f1.8 means this lens has a little iris inside. Hopefully you can see that. Iris inside here which opens up and closes down. I can control how much light comes in, but I'm also really controlling the depth of field. A lot of people like to see portrait photos. Really? A lot of people like to see portrait photos that are taken with a very shallow depth of field. You know, focus on the eyes, maybe even to the point where the nose is out of focus and the ears are out of focus, but the eyes are in focus. Because when you're taking a portrait photo, having the eyes in focus is really important, in my opinion. You can, however, close the iris down. In other words, open up the depth of field a little more when you're taking a portrait photo. So although this is an f1.8 lens, we can certainly shut that down. We could go to f2.8, for example, or even further, so to maybe f3.5 or f4, to bring more into focus if we want to. So just bear that in mind, that you can play a lot with the aperture settings on these cameras. Now, if you've got a digital SLR like this, you actually have what's called a control dial, and you can put it into what's known as aperture priority, where you've got control by turning this little wheel here. You've got control over the aperture. In other words, you are controlling how much light is coming in to that lens, and therefore what's in focus. If you're shooting on automatic, you don't always have control over that depth of field. So by putting the camera either onto aperture priority or full manual, you can actually control how big or small that opening is. And just remember, the smaller the opening, the higher the number, and the more you get in focus. So a higher number, more in focus; a lower number, less in focus. In other words, a shallower depth of field in your photo. So hopefully that little tip has helped you out. If you're a beginner to photography, if you like the channel, you can subscribe by hitting the subscribe button down there. You just need to create yourself a free Gmail account to become a subscriber on YouTube. I highly recommend you do it because there's some fantastic content on YouTube these days, stuff like this. Hopefully you found it interesting.